Hello Cosmos, I am Malu Colorin and I'm going to give you a little tour of my dye studio. Come with me. My studio is located inside a working farm where there are sheep and cows. And this used to be a mothering shed where cows would give birth to their little calves. So here we are. It has now been repurposed into a dye studio. I mean, it really is a shed, but it's a beautiful shed and I love it. I am going to start over here. I've got my experiments table. It's just a kind of an organized way to have all my working in progress of things that are not really for clients. They're more for my own personal fun, things that I'm trying out, mostly lake pigments that have been dried or are in the process of being made and I just haven't had the time to grind them, and other found pigments and things. I have some rocks, for example, that I brought back with me from Mexico, and I've been meaning to grind them into a pigment but haven't really had the time because I've been busy doing other things, so they're waiting here in my experiments table. And next to the experiments table, I've got my indigo vat, and over it I have Julia Tabakova's beautiful Inside Indigo board game, so that when I have people visiting my studio, they can more or less see the whole process of how green plants get turned into indigo. It's a great resource and I love it so much, as well as the book itself. So here you can see my iron vat. The biggest vat I have in my studio is an iron vat, and that is because I live in Ireland where it is cold a lot of the time and I'm a very low maintenance person. So the iron vat allows me to keep it going for most of the year without really having to give it much maintenance or keep it warm. I don't have a setup to keep a big vat like this warm. So that is why I opt for the iron vat. And whenever I need to dye wool or protein fibers, I make smaller vats. I think studios are also works in progress, and they are also ways of being creative. I really get a lot of joy from being creative in my own space in terms of adjusting it to whatever it is I'm doing and whatever it is I need. And one of the things I love the most is finding secondhand items that I can repurpose for my dye studio. It's really exciting for me. So as an example of that, here you can see a whiskey barrel that I got for almost nothing. It wasn't free, but it was very cheap. And it's waiting to be turned into a fermentation vat someday when I can kind of have the proper setup for it. I've got a plastic bin inside it, and the idea is that I will line it with wool all around to keep it warm, and the vat itself will be inside this bin. So for the moment they're just waiting, and they're just a placeholder for my rags, but it's great fun updating the studio as I can and as the budget allows as well. My latest achievement in terms of studio setup is this sink, which I have finished attaching to the plumbing, and I'm really proud of it. It's very exciting. Before I had this sink, I had been using this. This is where the water mains comes from, and that's where I used to wash my textiles. It goes into a drain under the floor. That wasn't very fun, and also the water kind of went everywhere, as you can see some of the dampness in there. But now I have a proper sink that is fully attached to the mains through a kind of DIY setup. I've got the water goes here, and I have these lovely hoses that I can turn on and off from here. And then the water just goes down there and into the drain. So yeah, I'm quite proud of it, honestly. And I thought I would show you, just so you can see that you can kind of, I guess, adjust your setup as you go along and as the budget allows. I know most of us don't have a massive budget, and a lot of natural dyeing, if you want to scale it up, requires, I guess, some sort of investment and equipment. You can't keep doing it in your kitchen, although I did do it in my kitchen for a number of years. So yeah, there's many things you can DIY, and I guess being a natural dyer also involves becoming a bit of a plumber and an electrician and a builder as well. So yeah, for me it's quite exciting. So yeah, I think you can embrace it as well as part of the creative practice, the building of your studio. And over here I have painted part of my wall with blackboard paint, which allows me to have my common recipes just there at hand so I can remember. I also have the kind of things I'm running low on or have run out of, so to remind me what to order. And then in the rest of the space I can just put whatever, you know, whenever I'm trying a new recipe or whatever, I can just write it down there and then. And on the topic of scaling natural dyes and DIYing and secondhand, I've only just purchased a top-loading washing machine, which is not very common here in Ireland. I know in other places like the US and Canada, that's very common. Here it is not. So it's actually a washing machine that was brought in from Boston, and it's secondhand. Really excited to get it due to logistical reasons. It's still not here, but this is where it's going to be set, right where I am standing. And I'm in the process of getting a secondhand paddle machine for dyeing. It's a small one. It'll take up to around 20 meters of fabric, but that's really exciting, and it'll hopefully also go in here if they fit side by side. And I'm really excited for that because it will enable me to start dyeing bigger quantities of fabric in a way that is not back-breaking. And over here I have my smaller vat, which is now, it's not really active at the moment, so it might not be looking amazing, but you can see I have it in a small bin. It's lined with wool to keep it warm, and then I have a bucket in there. And so when I have it active, I will heat it up with an immersion heater. Yes, it's not looking very interesting at all, but when I bring it up to life, when I have a project, I can restart it. It's a sugar vat. It's not just fructose. I add bits of ripe fruit and honey and other things to make it a bit more complex, but it is a sugar vat, so I can kind of restart it, and it keeps warm because I don't keep the immersion heater in there the whole time. So I heat it during the day, and then when I leave my studio, it stays warm thanks to the wool. So I guess that's another contraption. This is where I keep my supplies and my tools handy. I like having them on the wall, which liberates storage space, and then just dye stuffs and other things. Not very organized, but such is the life of a natural dye studio. Over here I have my most used supplies right at hand, because this is the table that I use the most when I'm dyeing, kind of just to help me prep fabric or fill in pots or whatever. You can see the pots down there, but this is the kind of space I use the most when I'm weighing out ingredients or stuff like that. And then over here is where I do the actual dyeing. I've got 3 hot plates from IKEA, very simple ones that I like because they're portable. So when I am teaching outside of my studio, which I do a lot of, I go to other places to teach, I can take my 3 hot plates with me in the car and bring them everywhere. So they're very handy, but when they're here, that's their setup. And you can see that I've got my leads, my electricity going up here in these very handy, I don't know, poles that were already part of the mothering shed. So I just kept them. I think they're actually part of the keeping the structure in place, but they're very handy for me because I can keep the leads out of the way. I do also bring people into my studio for open studio days and for workshops, so they don't trip over any cables. Everything is up there and then just plugged into the wall. So that's, yeah, another kind of handy tip. And the same over here. It all goes up there and then into the wall. Then I have some lovely presents that I've been given by, you know, friends and family, little love notes and just nice things that I love to be surrounded by beautiful art and images. And this was a gift from a lovely friend who's a quilter, just postcards and things. Another gift from a natural dyer who does cyanotypes as well, Ashley Ellis. Some naturally dyed bits. a map of Wicklow, which is where I am in Ireland. I live over here and my studio is in the village of Donard, somewhere around here. So it's a beautiful county. We call it the Garden of Ireland. So I love to be surrounded by all these lovely little bits. Over here I have my table of kind of dry stuff. This is where I keep my inks and my pigments and my lovely dye books as well. If you look at that area of the studio, that's where I like to keep the wet stuff, if you will. And then over here is more of kind of the dry area. And this is next to this other big table that I mostly use to make pigments, make inks. When I have people over, I just had an open studio, for example, and this is where I set them up to do different activities, such as watercolor making, for example, over here. So yeah, it's this multi-purpose table that is good to have. You can see some of my dye samples from my online workshop, Kitchen to Color Lab, and another pole over here, which I have used to hang dry dye plants from. So that's very handy. I don't keep them all in jars. Some of them, especially when they're still fresh, I'll hang them over here in net bags, and that helps dry them. Not so much in the winter months because it is very damp, but it tends to work. This area over here, it's pretty much kind of like a storage area. I have my family of mannequins over here. Some of them will be going to new homes because I don't really need that many. This is where I keep different materials and supplies and things. I'm also the co-founder of Fibershed Ireland, so this is where we keep some of the materials we take to events. I'm lucky that I have this space for that. Yeah, just different papers and bits and pieces. Hello, Cosmos. And yeah, like I said, I loved being surrounded by beautiful things. These are lovely clay vessels that I made with my friend Ione when she came to visit my studio. So they're here. And just nice little bits in my window. Some dry weld, you might recognize it. And finally, this is kind of my display table. When I have visitors, I have these, for example, these samples of wood that you can dye naturally, my upcoming events and workshops and promo materials, the Archipelago Festival of Colour, which is a festival I organise in the north of Ireland in July. Some of the wool that I like to use, such as Galway wool and Eru, which is an Irish brand of wool, and it's actually the farm that I am in. They produce this wool. And my lovely dye journal, which I have here for people to browse and look at the kind of different possibilities that they can achieve with natural dyes. I also do take this dye journal to events a lot of the time, and I'm lucky that it still hasn't been stolen, thankfully, because I do leave it there for people to browse. Somebody brought it to my attention. Some people could steal it. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that, and now I am scared. But no, I still bring it to events. And some other demo plants that I bring to show people the possibilities of the 3 historical dye plants here in Europe, such as woad. I've got the seeds of woad over here. Some woad pigment grown by Justine Aldersea Williams in England, the homegrown colour. Then some indigo pigment over here. I've got the dry leaves and the pigment itself. Oak galls. People don't always know what oak galls are, so I like to bring them on workshops and show them. Lovely madder roots with the colour they produce on wool on top. And the seeds of weld over here with the weld plant itself, or at least the flowers. Oh yeah, that's my kind of display table. And yeah, just a little place to sit down, have a little rest. I have tea usually, and just water. When people come, I also have biscuits and lovely treats for them. So this is it. This is pretty much my dye studio, and I'm happy to be able to show it to you, at least virtually. Thank you for attending the Cosmos conference. What a great event Thank you to Ash for organising, and I look forward to seeing you there in the talks or in the other Fringe events. And if you're in Ireland, or if you're ever visiting Ireland, please hit me up and I would love to welcome you into my studio. If you want to come visit in person, we will have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and have some conversations right here. I would love to welcome you in person.